It's an education in spiritual psychology, and so perhaps it's worthwhile to say why, to ground it a little bit. So conventional psychology very much relates to issues as all being beginning and ending in our thoughts, in the mind. And in this, there is this kind of consensus that a feeling, like grief or happiness or whatever, there are so many feelings and different soups of feeling. So there's a kind of consensus that it's not real. It's not really there. It's just because you think it's there. And if you think different, it won't be there anymore. So you have schools of psychology, for example, that try and change the way you think. Like happy, 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 I'm happy and I'm thinking positive and positive thought and all of this, in order to create the illusion of a feeling of happiness. Because it's an illusion because you created it with your thought. So the real thing is seen as the thought. So there is some truth in this. Thought does have a frequency. It has an energy. But when you really think about it, a thought like happy, its only meaning, its only reality is in some kind of sense of happiness that comes with the thought that I'm happy. The feeling is actually much more important. If I say happy, it's not doing it. It only gets any value, any truth at all from the feeling which is in the thought. So this attitude that feelings are not really that serious, emotions are not really that important, we should actually be ashamed of some of them. Insecurity, jealousy, hatred, all of these, these ones, you're bad if you have them, and that's also a feeling, badness.
A little bit less developed, let's say it like this.
Failed, but to fail by having a bad feeling is also a feeling. So in spiritual psychology, we really kind of turn the emphasis on its head. We get for real, more for real in a way, by saying the feeling comes first. The feeling is more important than the thought. Without the feeling, the thought is just nonsense. And not only that, but if we are in a feeling state, let's say, of peacefulness, the very nature of the thoughts that we have and the stories that we build will be peaceful. And we'll have peaceful thoughts, and we will see peace around us, and we will hear peace. We'll communicate peace. If we have whether or not we know it, a state of anger inside ourselves, which is totally okay, because we all do, it's part of the big tapestry of feeling in humans, then there will be angry, defensive thoughts. We'll see angry people, we'll feel threatened, we'll feel a need to threaten, and our language will become defensive and threatening. Between ourselves and ourselves, inside our heads, the kind of thoughts we have will be angry towards ourselves. So it's not nothing what's happening with our feelings. So we put a big emphasis on this middle junction of how things feel, and equally on the body, because between the thinking and the feeling there is one constant continuity as long as we're alive, which is the physical body. And anybody who suffered a craving for a substance addiction, or hunger, or premenstrual tension, or being pregnant, knows that the body itself chemically creates feelings of a certain nature, which in turn creates thoughts. Your hormones change, and you have a different kind of feeling about yourself coming forward, things break open. Like anger that hasn't been felt. If you're in premarital tension, the anger that's been pushed down suddenly is like irrepressible, and it starts to play out, which causes angry thoughts, and then you kill your husband. There is there is this causality going on. So psychiatry would say, okay, there's this chemical thing happening. So let's dose with Prozac the body, and in this will change the thoughts, and this will help the feelings. It's like this kind of bypass they make. What's crazy about that is that you generate the same biochemistry by going for a walk in nature as you do often by taking Prozac. It has the same subtle biochemical effect. Or mindful breathing. It's just more integrational, because then you have to deal with the thoughts and feelings that come forward, and it's a different process, like we talked about yesterday, then of containing and processing, rather than just using this kind of symptomatic drug to push it back down, to keep it quiet, to make it not feel. So we're going to be teaching about the energetic body, which is 20 years ago, when you talked about energy in this context, it was unscientific. It was like, if you talked about vibes, the vibes in the room, and you talked about energy, you were aware, you're out there on the fringe of esoteric stuff. I mean, people did talk about it, but it wasn't like every, engineer in Intel is talking about energy, and it's okay. And this is basically because of a revolution in quantum physics, which happened before, but only now comes into our baboon minds as possibility, which shows us that even on the raw physical level, meaning even at tinier particles of matter than the living cells, everything is 99.9% empty. There isn't actually a thing at all. There is no object. It's all, the other 0.0001% is energy in motion. And not only is it energy in motion, it's here and not here at the same time. It's blinking. And not only that, if you are conscious of it, if consciousness comes towards it, it changes the nature of the energy. So it goes from being a wave to a particle. This is the double slit experiment in quantum physics. You don't need to master quantum physics, and I certainly don't understand it, but there's enough insights coming out there, enough consensus to show that we're talking, when we talk about physical matter, about energy. This means that miracles are possible through consciousness. This means that when you're healing somebody psychologically, you can't just leave out the physical. You can't just say, okay, there's no connection between the cramping in his shoulders and his extremely rigid father. It was no longer logical to do that. There is a connection, because this is energy contracted in the physical repeatedly over time because of a feeling which is contracted. And it plays out in a cycle by itself. The physical feeds in a cycle the emotional, which feeds the mental, which again feeds the emotional, and back to the physical. It loops around the three layers. So to leave out any one aspect of this is to give a half treatment, to relate in a half way. So when you're talking to somebody and you're in therapy, in a session, treating somebody, sometimes you're talking at one moment about their father that died when they were 20. Next moment, they completely tell some random story somewhere else, which seems like a distraction, nothing to do with it. But there are no accidents. It's because of this relationship that they move to that. And often if you follow them rather than sticking to a prescription, it comes back then to, oh no, I've got such a pain in my shoulder, and suddenly my body feels really heavy. And there's this free play when you follow the client between these three layers. And what would seem to a conventional psychologist to be, irrelevant to the story, suddenly, if you wait and follow the client, comes forward as being incredibly, geniusly relevant and interconnected. And of course here the client is always the number one, the leader. They're leading you, in a way you're supporting them to lead themselves. to let their awareness let whatever's coming forward as relevant in any moment. Even when they think they're distracting you, that what they choose of what, they start telling you, I have to tell you something that happened 3 days ago, what they choose is never random. If in a meditation you suddenly start seeing images of random shit, it's not random. Because of all the things we could imagine, these ones come forward. So this spaciousness is really, really, really important. So on the physical, we've got this emptiness and this basically matter itself is alive, vibrating and responding in relation to different frequencies, and one of those frequencies is consciousness, especially if it's pure consciousness in the here and now. When it responds, and we know this on a cellular level, the tiniest cellular level, there is a kind of biochemical effect. Stress, for example, is cortisol. When you are insecure or get afraid, cortisol floods the system. This creates fear and anger, and brings the vitality to move. And if this vitality is not able to move by itself, then it becomes a block, because it's from the biochemical through the, and now we're calling it fear. It's denied, and so it creates a density, the denial. The mind says, no, I'm not afraid. I'm really A-OK and cool. So it denies it. So what was the free-flowing, quite strong energy of vitality, getting ready to run from the tiger, suddenly is pushed and compactified and held down. We're talking subtle energy now. So it's got a density. In 20 years, 30 years' time, they're going to start investigating this as material. It's not hocus pocus. It's got a density, it's got a heaviness, it's got a form. This is a block, something that's repressed. And it's got a location. So we're going to learn all about this, but on the left side, for example, is more the feminine aspect. So a block to do with the mother or females, or the feminine side of ourselves will be more often located here. If it's here, it's going to be more to do with what we've talked about yesterday, the heart chakra element. If it's here, it's going to be more to do with the instinctive element. If it's behind the back, it's more to do with history and the ancestors and shadows, things that are totally not allowed to exist, or things that oppress us from our parents. If it's in the future, it's very much going to be to do with fear and facing the world and social aspects. And so there is a kind of geography in the location of this energetic blocks. But, and it's real, you're going to experience it, you can feel this, you can sense it, you can feel the density when you move through space around your body or around the body of somebody that you're working with. It can be seen, it emits a light. Biophotons. Now they're talking, neuroscientists are talking about consciousness being related to biophotons. Photons are the smallest portions of light, and that communication is happening from the brain through the release of biophotons. This is a new scientific inquiry with evidences. It's got moisture and dryness. It's really experiential. It's got age. It's got temperature. The difference, when there is a kind of anger which is really hot and your whole body heats up, and then there's a kind of anger where you go frozen cold, just cold. It's almost like you don't feel anything anymore. So it has a temperature which is telling us something. It has a taste. It has a smell. So this is physical stuff we're talking about, but on a subtle layer. And all of this information is coming to us all the time. But we are, in a way, so much in kindergarten in our human evolution that the mind sticks to its old programs. It still thinks the sun sets rather than the world turning. That's how far back we are.
So if I have even like the slightest thing, even through meditation, I have an itch in my knee. Does it mean something about being in this area? And
if it bothers you, if it's distracting you, you can have itches, the wind can blow on your face, temperatures change, everything's moving all the time. If it's an issue, if it bothers you, then the nature of how it bothers you is important.
Okay.
Yeah.
The nature of how it
Yeah,
bothers
and it's
you,
the same.
what it's bringing up.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the same if you take it in a much more fundamental way. You know, if you have an issue with a person, so is that person the problem? You know, so our conventional conditioned way of thinking is, yes, that person's a problem. I've got a problem with this person. This person is a problem. But what's actually happening is the effect of that person on us, which means it's 100% responsibility of us, is causing us unrest. You know, the world is full of assholes, but not all of them bother us. And we choose one. And they drive us crazy. So it is 100% our responsibility. The problem is never with the other person. We are everything that occurs in our universe, and that includes when we're up and walking around in the shops and everything, not just in meditation. We're responsible for the effects.
So it's how that person affects us that's giving us the message of what needs to be healed.
And the only way we can know anybody at all is through how they affect us. So there would be a kind of chaos. You know, we've got the body holding everything together, but still there would be a kind of chaos in the system of like blocks here and you know, a mess, except that there is this perfect harmony and symmetry in the universe, meaning we have 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, 2 eyes, 2 ears. Everything's based on sets of 2 dualities, left, right, in front, behind, up, down, which means there's always a center point. Whatever happens, centering happens by itself, energetically. So when there's a conflict going on inside us, that very conflict depends on that center point. We see the conflict. We feel that somewhere deep down we see the warring sides. There is always this default to centering. When there is a psychotic episode, the default center position can be up here, witnessing it. But there's always a center. We can totally trust this natural centering ability. Sometimes we find ourselves coming to center here, sometimes between our feet, sometimes above our head, sometimes in the center of our head, which is not where we are naturally. Normally we're just in this sea of thoughts. But the centering is always there, anyway, whether or not our consciousness is resting in it, or centering in the heart. So this center line is really, really important. You know, the left hand would be in a total competition with the right hand if there wasn't a center position.
Say that again?
The left hand would be competing with the right hand of the body if we weren't at the same time in a center position.
Okay.
We wouldn't be able to walk down the street if we weren't in a center position. Beforehand, you can totally trust the center position. We wouldn't stay on the planet if there wasn't a center position of gravity. So along this center line, and this is all the way through non-dual therapy and spiritual psychology, and what we're talking about with the chakras, is this natural centering. And there is a gravitational pull towards the center. Because in a way, we're like balls, and like a universe is a ball, and in the middle is a kind of black hole, or a tunnel of emptiness. But emptiness is not empty, it's full of everything, it's pure potential. It's pure innocence, pure love, pure peace. It's all the good stuff. And it's always pulling towards itself and expressing out again. Always this movement, this revolution happening. And this you see in the universe and you see in the human being as well. And all the points, energetic points that you'll learn about in these years and the chakras, the homecoming is always to this center line. So if you're just here, for example, and there's a block of grief and all of this, what's happening is there is this gravitational pull of pure receptivity into the heart chakra, at the same time that there is this kind of expression of effects, this revolution happening. So in that sense, chakras are they're open on both sides. You know what I mean? It's not like your heart chakra is like a cup and you can only take so much in and it's too much. That means that there's a block here. Because actually you can take everything in from infinity into infinity on the inside. There's a circulation happening. It means that from our conditioned point of view, the magic is in the spaces between the blocks, or the space within the block. It's in the empty spaces, because that's where the subtle stuff is. That's where there's infinity in every space. So we can recognize this. When you have a strong feeling of love, for example, you can recognize this center pull, this gravitational pull, and this natural expression that comes back. And they are looking into the biochemistry of love. It does have a chemical, a physical, a more crude aspect to it. Dopamine, for example, in the brain gives the feeling of love, and it's already a chemical reflection of what's happening through the blood, through the whole system, how the energy is getting distributed through the feeling. As we go through the chakras and the education, you'll hear more of the kind of qualities which are there in the emptiness, which are in that sourced, are coming through the center of the vortex in a way. Purity, innocence, love, peace, freedom, oneness, stillness, silence. Of course, awareness and consciousness is a subtle quality. And you'll get to know that this can be trusted. This doesn't get lost. When you try and, say you're meditating on the heart chakra and a feeling of love comes forward, if you try and grasp it, or keep it, you're left with the feeling of grasping, the feeling of possession, the feeling of keeping, or the feeling of fear which led to grasping it. The love is like always in the let go. And it's the same way that we move into the subtle fields of the body. So I hope it's a little bit less hocus pocus when we say you can see chakras, or you can see energy, or you can see auras, because this really is possible, because it actually is material. It doesn't matter what we tell ourselves with our minds. If we're feeling angry, that anger is real. There's a reality to it. There's as much reality to it as there is to the chair. It's just more subtle. And what we're moving towards is moving away from taking it for granted and ignoring it, and moving into realizing the incredible power and potential and freedom and benefit which is there when we let our awareness move with it, when we recruit it, when we acknowledge these rivers running through us. And of course, experience is the main thing. Don't believe it. Beliefs are crap. Best belief is beliefs are crap. They're useful for short-term things. Experience it. Experience goes before belief. Check it out, and if it's not true, then tell us.